The Galactic Concord had ruled the stars for millennia. They were the architects of interstellar law, the overseers of trade, and the ultimate enforcers of order. To them, Earth was nothing more than a minor world, a species barely worthy of notice. So when the Concord set its sights on Terran space, they did not hesitate. A rich, resource-filled colony on the edge of the Orion Arm had caught their attention. Technically, it belonged to Earth, but to the Concord, that was a formality. Humans, after all, were new to the stars. They had fought no great wars. They had conquered no legendary foes. They were small, and small things did not get a say in the affairs of giants. Without warning, a Concord battle fleet entered Terran space. They came under the pretense of a security inspection, but the moment their warships surrounded the colony, the truth became clear. The transmission was cold, emotionless. By decree of the Galactic Concord, this system is now under our protection. All Terran personnel are to vacate immediately. The response from Earth was swift. Terran diplomats demanded an emergency council meeting, citing the Treaty of Keonis, a galactic agreement that guaranteed every species the right to protect its own borders. The Concord ignored them. No explanations, no negotiations. They simply took what they wanted. And that was their mistake. At first, the rest of the galaxy barely noticed. Concord fleets had done this before, carving up lesser civilizations and absorbing them into their empire. The difference this time, they had done it to humans. Earth did not send a desperate plea. They did not beg for intervention. Instead, a single transmission was sent directly to the Concord High Command. It was not a threat, not a declaration of war. It was just 6 words. Return what is ours. Last chance. The Concord Council laughed. A mere threat from Earth. What could humanity possibly do? Their warships, while advanced, were outnumbered 100 to 1. Their fleets had never fought a war of this scale. What could a single species do against the combined might of the galaxy's oldest empires? So the Concord gave their answer. They broadcasted their response on every major network across the stars. The image of a Concord admiral standing on the steps of the occupied Terran colony played for billions to see. He smiled, smug and victorious, as he gave his official statement. Earth has no authority here. They will learn their place. For 3 days, there was silence. No response from Earth. No retaliation. No fleets mobilizing. Some began to believe humanity had accepted defeat. Then, without warning, deep space sensors across the Concord's borders began picking up something impossible. A gravitational anomaly, moving through the void, growing larger by the second. It was too big to be a fleet, too fast to be an asteroid, too focused to be anything natural. The Concord dismissed the reports at first. A sensor malfunction, a system error. Then the first sector went dark. No warning, no distress calls, just silence. And that was when the galaxy began to understand. Humanity had not surrendered. They had simply given the Concord one last chance. And now, that chance was gone. As the Concord laughed off Earth's warning, a palpable silence settled over the galaxy. To the rest of the universe, it seemed as if humanity had folded, their pride shattered, their spirit broken. The great empires, ruling over countless worlds, could not fathom that Earth would dare to stand up against them. Earth, a young species still finding its footing on the stars, was nothing more than a brief blip in galactic history. At least, that's what they thought. But those who underestimated humanity had one thing wrong. Earth was not weak. Earth was not small. And the Terran resolve had just been ignited. For 3 days there was nothing. No fleets appeared at Concord's borders, no sudden military actions. The Concord, secure in their supremacy, began to grow complacent. Trade routes resumed as if nothing had happened, and the conquered colonies were left to their fates. Humanity's threats were dismissed as mere bravado from a species with no understanding of true power. In the heart of Earth's government, however, things were different. A quiet, simmering fury had begun to brew in the minds of Terran leaders. They knew what was at stake. They knew the consequences of allowing the Concord to think they could simply dominate Earth. No, this would not end in submission. Not this time. The United Terran Navy, once regarded as a modest force, now shifted into full combat readiness. But it wasn't just the military that prepared. In every corner of Terran space, people rallied. From the bustling cities on Earth to the farthest colonies, everyone knew the time was coming. Yet still, the Concord thought they had all the time in the world. Their spies reported no unusual movements, no sign of Earth's military assets assembling. Everything appeared normal until a final warning came from Earth, a message that had not been heard since humanity's early days of space exploration. It was an old signal, one used only in extreme cases, reserved for the most significant of threats. The message went out to the entire galaxy, from the United Terran Navy's flagship, the Arcadia. It was a message meant to be heard by every species in the known universe. No one was left untouched. Humanity is not what you think. Prepare for the reckoning. The Concord, already smug in their victory, pay it little mind. Another hollow threat from a defeated species, they thought. But then, something strange happened. As this final message was broadcasted, a ripple passed through deep space sensors. It was subtle at first, just a flicker in the background. No one could pinpoint it. But soon, reports came in from every corner of the galaxy. A ship moving too fast. A ship too large. The readings were impossible. The galactic sensors blinked with confusion. The anomalous object was growing closer. And the strange part, it wasn't just moving, it was heading directly toward Concord space. That was when the fear began to spread. What had been a quiet threat from Earth was now no longer something they could ignore. The Concord, realizing they had underestimated humanity, scrambled to mobilize their fleets. But it was too late. The Leviathan had already started its journey to them, and no one in the galaxy, not even the Concord, could predict what it was capable of. The silence that had preceded the storm would soon be shattered, and the galaxy would never be the same. The galaxy's breath held in suspense as the mysterious ship moved ever closer to Concord space. What had once been an undistinguished blip on the screen was now impossible to ignore. The object was massive, far larger than any ship the Concord had ever seen. At first, the Concord's high command dismissed it as a malfunction, a trick of sensors, perhaps an asteroid on a collision course. But that explanation quickly evaporated when the anomaly's trajectory remained unwavering, and the object didn't veer off course. The first Concord fleet to encounter the unknown vessel was the Genshira Task Force, stationed at the outer rim of Concord space. They had been tasked with patrolling the borders, but nothing prepared them for what they saw that day. From the depths of space, the mysterious ship slowly emerged from the darkness, its massive form eclipsing nearby stars. The sensors flared in alarm, confirming what they had feared. It was no mistake. The Leviathan had arrived. At over 4 kilometers long and covered in dark, almost otherworldly plating, the ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, yet it looked like something far more ancient, something that had been built for a purpose long lost to history. Its hull absorbed light, making it look like a void moving through space, and as it grew nearer, the readings only got more inexplicable. The energy signature emanating from the ship was staggering, unlike any technology known to the galaxy. No one had seen a ship capable of generating that level of power without breaking the laws of physics. The commander of the Genshira, Admiral Tova Rail, ordered her fleet into formation. They assumed this must be some sort of Terran weapon, one they had yet to encounter, perhaps something from Earth's secret weapon programs. But no one had prepared for what came next. The Leviathan didn't respond to hails or radio calls. It didn't fire warning shots or make any effort to negotiate. It simply moved. And as it did, the ship radiated an overwhelming sense of power, as if the very fabric of space around it bent to its will. The Concord ships attempted to position themselves around the Leviathan, hoping to trap it with their superior numbers. But as soon as they opened fire, it became clear that they were not dealing with a conventional enemy. The Leviathan's shields absorbed the incoming blasts without even flinching. The first wave of firepower simply fizzled against the energy barrier, while the Leviathan moved at an almost impossible speed, gliding through space as though gravity itself had no hold over it. Within moments, the first ship, a Dreadnought-class battleship, was hit with a single blast from the Leviathan's port cannon. The beam carved through the Concorde warship as if it were made of paper, disintegrating its hull in a blinding flash. The fleet froze in horror as the remains of the ship crumpled into space dust. Commander Rail's voice trembled as she gave the order to retreat, but it was already too late. A second burst of light sliced through the void, and another dreadnought, this one even larger, disappeared in an instant, its once proud silhouette now reduced to nothing more than scattered debris. A sense of panic rippled through the fleet. "All ships engage." Rail barked, but it was a futile command. The Leviathan was not just fast, it was unstoppable. In mere moments, a third Concorde battleship was obliterated, and the rest of the fleet scrambled to escape. But the Leviathan was already past them, moving on to the next target. From the bridge of the Leviathan, Captain Elias Carver watched the unfolding destruction in silence. He had expected resistance, but the fleet was barely a challenge. As the enemy ships scattered like ants before a storm, Carver's only thought was that this was just the beginning. This was the reckoning, and the galaxy was about to learn that Earth would no longer be the quiet backwater it once had been. The Leviathan was not just a ship. It was a force of nature, and it had come to make the galaxy tremble. The galaxy had watched, stunned and silent, as the Leviathan tore through Concorde's fleet with terrifying precision. The first wave of Concorde warships was obliterated in seconds, their mighty hulls reduced to fragments floating in the cold, unforgiving void. Yet the Leviathan didn't slow. It didn't hesitate. It simply continued its relentless march, cutting through the fabric of the Concorde's defenses like a blade through silk. In the heart of the Concorde High Command, chaos reigned. News of the ship's impossible power had spread like wildfire, and soon every fleet in the Concorde's arsenal was being mobilized. The best, most elite fleets of the Galactic Concorde, armed with weapons that had shattered the strongest defenses in the galaxy, were now being assembled to confront this new threat. The Leviathan was a challenge like no other. Its energy signature defied all known laws of physics, its shields absorbed every attack with ease, and its weapons. The Leviathan's weapons were a mystery. No one had seen anything like them. There were no known energy blasts, no plasma weapons, no conventional missiles. Only a single focused beam of light, pure, unyielding, and devastating. Admiral Rail's surviving fleet was the first to come face to face with this terrifying power. The remaining Concorde ships, now numbering only half their original size, moved into formation around the Leviathan. They knew what they had to do: overwhelm the Leviathan with sheer numbers, throw everything they had at it, and hope that something would work. Rail's voice boomed over the comms, her orders steady, but filled with a growing desperation. "All ships, fire at will." The ships fired in unison, unleashing a torrent of firepower, missiles, energy blasts, and plasma cannons. The sheer magnitude of the assault was enough to make even the most seasoned captains nervous, but the Leviathan, calm and calculating, moved with chilling efficiency. Its shields flared briefly with each strike, absorbing the blasts as though they were nothing more than raindrops. The Leviathan didn't slow, didn't falter. It just advanced. Then, with a sudden and horrifying speed, the Leviathan turned, its massive guns swinging into position. The fleet had no time to react. The first shot rang out like a thunderclap, the energy beam lancing through the void. The entire front of a massive Concorde battle cruiser, one of the most advanced warships in the fleet, disintegrated in a single blinding flash. The light from the explosion reached the nearby ships in an instant, a brilliant and terrifying wave that left nothing behind but floating debris. The second shot followed almost immediately, this one aimed at the heart of the fleet. In one motion, a dozen warships, including the most heavily armored Concord dreadnoughts, were reduced to smoldering husks, their structures collapsing inward as the Leviathan's beam passed through them. Admiral Rail's eyes went wide with horror as the sight unfolded before her. She had seen the power of the Leviathan firsthand, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. It wasn't just that the ship was powerful. It was that the Leviathan seemed to know. It knew how to hit with surgical precision, to disable the most dangerous parts of their ships, and to leave nothing but chaos and ruin behind. The fleet scattered in panic, but it was useless. The Leviathan wasn't just a ship, it was a weapon of destruction, and it was unstoppable. For every Concord vessel that managed to fire a few more desperate shots, 2 more fell to the Leviathan's overwhelming might. The battle was over before it had even begun. In a matter of minutes, the remains of the Concord fleet drifted through space, a wreckage of burned-out husks and scattered debris. Admiral Rail, her voice shaking, finally issued the command that no one ever wanted to hear. Retreat. All ships, retreat. But it was already too late. The Leviathan had made its point. And with its arrival, the galaxy had been shown a single, undeniable truth. Earth was not a species to be underestimated. Not anymore. In the aftermath of the Leviathan's destructive assault, the galaxy sat in stunned silence. Concord's once proud fleet had been reduced to smoldering remnants, and the most powerful empire in the known universe now seemed broken, its dominance shattered in a matter of hours. No one had expected such a quick, decisive blow. No one had prepared for the sheer power of humanity's retribution. The remaining Concord forces fled. Their commanders, shaken and confused, scrambled to regroup, but the Leviathan didn't allow them the luxury of time. Its pursuit was methodical, cold, and relentless. Each time a Concord ship attempted to retreat or regroup, the Leviathan appeared like a shadow on the horizon, its engines burning with the intensity of a star. And each time, the Concord fleet found itself facing destruction once again. In a desperate bid to avoid complete annihilation, the surviving commanders sent out a galactic-wide distress signal, hoping for reinforcements. But the message, broadcasted across every major system, went unanswered. At first, it wasn't that the other galactic powers were indifferent. Far from it. They watched the unfolding carnage with growing unease. The Leviathan was a force they didn't understand, a weapon that had decimated an entire fleet without breaking a sweat. But as the minutes stretched into hours and the Leviathan pressed on, they began to realize something chilling. The Leviathan wasn't just hunting Concord. It was hunting anyone who dared to stand against humanity. News of the battle spread like wildfire. Across the stars, transmissions from neutral systems and previously untouchable empires flooded in. The messages were simple, yet profound. Earth has arrived. The once dismissed species was now the most feared in the galaxy. In a matter of days, they had not only toppled the galactic Concord, but had turned the established order upside down. Empires that had thought themselves invulnerable were now on edge, knowing that Earth, humanity, was capable of destroying everything they had built. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy was forced to consider a world that was once insignificant. The great alien civilizations had long dominated the stars, expanding at will, enforcing their will with military might and political machinations. But now, for the first time, they were afraid. In the halls of the Concord High Command, the mood was one of dread and disbelief. Leaders gathered in emergency sessions, trying to come up with a strategy, a countermeasure, anything that might stop the Leviathan and its terrifying power. But they were coming to a horrifying realization. They had no means to fight back. Not against the Leviathan, not against Earth's newfound might. And still, humanity did not respond with anger. They did not make threats. Earth's message had been delivered. They would not stand for subjugation. They would not be crushed underfoot like so many other species. But now they were silent. They were watching. As the Concord scrambled to rebuild, they knew that their time as the galaxy's dominant power was over. They had been humbled by a species they had once considered nothing more than a minor annoyance. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the silence. The Leviathan had vanished from their sensors, no longer a threat they could pinpoint. But somewhere, in the vastness of space, it was still there waiting, watching. The galaxy's greatest power had been brought to its knees by humanity's resolve, and no one knew what would come next. All they could do now was wait for the next move from Earth. And no one would sleep soundly until it came. In the weeks that followed the Leviathan's devastating assault on the Concorde, the galaxy's greatest powers could only watch and wait. No longer was Earth the quiet, insignificant world that had once been overlooked. The Leviathan had cast a long shadow across the stars, and with it, humanity had sent a clear message. The age of conquest was over. The Concorde, reeling from its catastrophic defeat, scrambled to recover, but their efforts were in vain. The fleets they had once considered invincible were now crippled, their most powerful warships reduced to debris. And despite their best efforts to rebuild their forces, they found themselves increasingly isolated. Allies who had once looked to the Concorde for protection now distanced themselves, afraid of provoking Earth's wrath. But it wasn't just the Concorde that was reeling. The entire galaxy was changing. The Hiveran Collective, a species known for its ruthless expansionist policies, had begun retreating from contested systems. The Jitan Dominion, a warlike empire known for its brutal tactics, had begun fortifying its borders, sending frantic messages to the outer colonies. Even the peaceful Meraki Confederacy, whose strength had always been in diplomacy, found themselves re-evaluating their stance on Earth. Fear was spreading across the stars, and with it came whispers. Whispers of Earth's true power, of the secrets hidden within its fleet, of a species capable of turning the tide of galactic politics in the blink of an eye. The Leviathan was just the beginning, they said. Earth had only shown a fraction of what it could do. Yet, despite the growing anxiety, there was still no sign of further aggression from Earth. The message they had sent was clear. They had no interest in domination, but they would not bow to tyranny. For the first time in history, a species that had been overlooked, underestimated, and undervalued had risen up to demand respect. But that was the problem. No one knew what Earth wanted. For centuries, the galaxy had been ruled by empires, each with their own motivations and desires for power. But humanity was different. Earth had never been a conqueror, never sought to dominate or expand. They had always been a species of explorers, thinkers, and creators. And yet the sheer might of the Leviathan left everyone wondering, was this power for peace, or was it for something darker? In the galactic capital, a summit of the major powers was convened. The topic was simple. Earth. What did it want? How could they prevent it from becoming an unstoppable force? And more importantly, how could they survive the shadow of Earth? Each representative came to the table with their own fears and suspicions. The Meraki leaders spoke of diplomacy, hoping to find a peaceful solution. The Jigan demanded a military response, calling for an alliance to counter Earth's power. The Hiverans sought to negotiate, offering resources in exchange for protection. But every one of them knew deep down that they were no longer the ones in control. The galaxy's fate had shifted, and no one knew if humanity would lead them into a new era of cooperation or if Earth's shadow would be a reminder of their weakness for years to come. And then, without warning, Earth's voice finally broke the silence. A simple message, broadcasted to every corner of the galaxy, resonated across all communication channels. We are not your enemies, but do not mistake our silence for weakness. The galaxy will change, and it will be shaped by those who respect it. And as that message echoed through the stars, one thing was certain: humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer up for debate. For the first time in galactic history, the established order had been disrupted. The once invincible empires, those that had dominated the galaxy for millennia, were now facing an existential dilemma. What role would humanity play in the future of the stars? Earth's message had been heard across the galaxy, and it had left a lasting impact. The silence that followed spoke volumes, but it was the actions that came next that would shape the future. Earth was not making demands, but it was making its presence known. Forcefully, yet strategically. Despite the fear that gripped the galaxy, the Terran government had refused to act with unchecked aggression. The Leviathan had vanished, its mission complete, and humanity had retreated back into its borders. They hadn't declared war, nor had they sought vengeance. Instead, they adopted a different approach: diplomacy with a bite. In the following months, Earth sent envoys to the major galactic powers. The message was simple: the age of tyranny and subjugation was over, and Earth would no longer allow their species to be overlooked or mistreated. But these envoys weren't negotiating from a place of weakness. They came with the full weight of humanity's military might behind them. They came with the threat of the Leviathan, the shadow that would forever linger in the minds of those who had dared to challenge Earth's existence. The galaxy's great powers were forced to rethink their strategies. The Jutan Dominion, once a belligerent empire bent on conquest, now found itself on the defensive. The Meraki Confederacy, who had long maintained a policy of isolation, found themselves in need of alliances with species they had once considered beneath them. The Hiveran Collective, with their hive-driven expansionist ambitions, reconsidered their plans of assimilation in the face of humanity's sudden rise. But it wasn't just the galactic powers who were affected. Humanity's influence spread to the smaller, once-ignored species, the colonies that had been crushed under the heels of their conquerors. Now they found themselves emboldened by Earth's example, no longer content to stay silent. The rebellion that had long simmered beneath the surface of these oppressed worlds began to flare up as systems previously controlled by the Concord and other empires began to demand their freedom. The first signs of change came from the Vorontal Cluster, a collection of star systems on the edge of Concord space. The Vorontal were a once subjugated species, bound by cruel treaties, but after Earth's bold move, they had begun to act. A coalition of these worlds sent a message to Earth, requesting an audience. They wished to join the growing movement toward equality, to no longer live under the rule of empires. The Terran Council, recognizing an opportunity to further weaken the Concord's grasp, accepted the invitation. The Vorontal became the first of many. Slowly but surely, more systems began to break away from their previous oppressors, looking to Earth for guidance and support. The Leviathan might not be there to defend them, but the shadow of Earth loomed large, a symbol of resistance and strength. In the galactic capital, the Concord's leadership finally accepted the inevitable. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were watching as their empire splintered before their eyes. The galaxy was changing, faster than anyone had anticipated, and Earth was at the center of it all. For the first time in history, a single species, once considered insignificant, was now charting the course for the future. The rising tide of change was unstoppable, and it was driven by humanity's unyielding will to claim their place in the galaxy. The galaxy had never seen anything like this. The echoes of Earth's rise reverberated through every corner of known space, and the once unchallenged powers of the galaxy were now scrambling to keep pace with humanity's audacious advance. It had only been months since the arrival of the Leviathan, and yet the transformation was undeniable. Earth was no longer a distant, insignificant world. It was the beating heart of a new galactic order. Concord, broken and humiliated, had no choice but to sit at the negotiating table. Their empire, now fractured and vulnerable, had been forced into alliances with former rivals, including the Hiveran Collective, the Jutan Dominion, and even the Meraki Confederacy. These once dominant empires, which had ruled the galaxy for millennia, now found themselves united by a single, undeniable truth. Humanity's place in the stars was no longer up for debate. Earth's representatives were everywhere, quietly but decisively pushing for reforms. They didn't demand territories. They didn't demand wealth. What Earth sought was far simpler: respect. Respect for their sovereignty, respect for their species, and respect for their place among the stars. And with the power of the Leviathan at their back, no one dared deny them. The most radical shift came when Earth proposed the formation of a galactic council, a unified body where every species, regardless of size or power, would have an equal voice. For the first time in galactic history, no species would be relegated to second-class status. The powerful would no longer trample the weak. The oppressed would no longer suffer in silence. The proposal sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The ancient empires, who had grown accustomed to their dominance, were hesitant. The Jitan and Hiveran viewed the idea with skepticism, wary of losing their hold on the galaxy's political stage. The Meraki, meanwhile, debated the risks of such a drastic change. Yet despite their hesitations, Earth's influence was undeniable. The galaxy had already been reshaped by the arrival of humanity, and no one could ignore the power it commanded. Slowly but surely, the first tentative steps toward the Galactic Council were taken. Systems that had once been controlled by the Concord and other empires now found themselves forming coalitions with Earth, recognizing that their futures would be brighter in a galaxy where diplomacy and equality reigned. The Leviathan, while still a force to be reckoned with, was no longer the symbol of humanity's wrath. It became a symbol of their strength and resolve to protect what they had built. But the transformation wasn't just political. Earth's influence sparked a cultural renaissance, a new era of cooperation and collaboration that stretched across the stars. Terran scientists shared their innovations freely, while new educational programs flourished across previously repressed worlds. A vast network of galactic trade routes began to open, and with it, new alliances were formed. The galaxy was no longer a battleground of empires, but a collective of species striving to create a future of unity and prosperity. And as the first session of the Galactic Council convened, with Earth sitting proudly among the stars, one undeniable truth became clear. Humanity had not only claimed its place in the galaxy, but it had reshaped the galaxy itself. The dawn of a new era had arrived, and it was driven by Earth's will to forge a future where all could thrive. In the quiet expanse of space, where once Earth's voice had been nothing more than a whisper, it now rang out clear and strong, a beacon of hope for the galaxy's future. And as the Leviathan slowly drifted through the stars, it stood as a silent reminder. The galaxy had changed, and humanity would be the one to lead it.